right, joined now by my guy, Brendan Vogt of DNVR Sports. Really appreciate you stopping by, Brendan. Brendan and I obviously friends covering the Nuggets here in Denver, but it's nice to have another face on the podcast just to talk Nuggets. Just so like it's better that way, I think. But Brendan, really appreciate you stopping by. Obviously, we get into the nitty gritty of this team all the time. We talk about all the fun little details of this team, but I want you to take a step back with me for a second. They're 33-15 right now as we record this on Tuesday night. 8th best net rating on cleaning the glass, 10th in offense, 12th in defense. What is the biggest story of the year so far in your mind? Just like, hey, we're 48 games into this thing for Denver. Where are they at?
Well, big picture, I think a lot of people right now are taking a beat to compare this team to where they were last season. Last year, obviously a title team. You've got enough of a sample size now in the regular season to go, are there signs? Are there signs they can replicate that? And I think there are some. I mean, the clutch defense, you just mentioned that as maybe the biggest one. I don't know if you remember, man, we spent all of last year debating this concept of a switch. Can you turn it on? Does Denver have one? And of course, the playoffs started and they did. And so this year we're seeing that, right? They could lose to the Knicks by 40 if they go too hard, I think, in the nightlife. But when they decide to play defense, they're beating the likes of the Celtics in Boston. They're locking down the Bucks despite a big 3-point disparity. And so to me, I look at the defense, and then I look at the bench conversation too. And that reminds me of last year as well. Without a doubt, the Achilles heel of this team. But it'll be funny to kind of watch that conversation change, I think, as the rotation crunches. Because, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, it's not really about having 10 guys. We learned that last year. It's 7.5 guys. And I think Denver's much closer to that than it feels. So a lot of this to me is looking pretty similar, Ryan, to how it did last year.
Yeah, there's no doubt that if you can pick and choose different holes within the team, just like there were different holes in the team last year. But by and large, it feels very similar. You can feel the pacing of this season for Denver, I think. Just from the sense of, hey, they don't always go hard all the time, but when you know it when you see it. And I think that clutch defense number is a really salient point, just because we saw that last year, and somehow they got even better as a clutch defense this year. And like they seem very locked in and connected and know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And building that around Jokic, we already have proof of concept. Like, they can defend around Jokic. It's more about, can they defend in the lineups where he's even off the floor now?
Yeah, defensive chemistry. I talked about this with our buddy Adam Matas today on our show, which I won't plug on your show, but I did do it.
You can. Okay.
Defensive chemistry is a thing as well, right? And we talk so much about how well these guys play together as a starting five offensively, but a big part about not just winning the title, man, but going 16-4, which is no joke, was that cohesion on the other end. And as you were talking, I was thinking it almost feels like an under-discussed point locally that Jokic has been really good defensively in the big games this year. And so yes, they've built something around him. KCP's a menace. Porter's elevated his floor defensively. But I think part of it is, Jokic finished that Milwaukee game with 3 steals, 2 blocks. Yeah. If Jonathan Isaac put that line together, you'd go, there's your defensive dynamo, right? And Jokic has, especially in the clutch, and maybe that's where this team takes on some of his personality is, can they defend at an elite level for 4 quarters, 82 games? We haven't seen that. Can they defend at an elite enough level in the final 5 minutes of a game? For 2 years running now, the answer's been yes.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things I'm going to argue for Jokic winning a 3rd MVP at this point.
Sure.
Denver's their rim protection defense this year, it's actually pretty good. Yeah. It's a surprising point that it's one of the things that I don't think we've talked enough about locally, but cleaning the glass has them at a pretty high number in terms of their field goal percentage against at the rim, which has always been the Achilles heel for this team. And they found these minor ways to get better. There have been other ways where they've gotten worse. Jokic's individual efficiency is just slightly down than it was last year. Like Porter's shooting a slightly worse percentage at various points. KCP, same thing. Aaron Gordon, same thing. But I still feel like, especially when it comes to like a Jokic MVP conversation, he continues to be better than ever. There are these cracks in the armor at times, but like he just looks and feels like a better player at this point. And I think he's well on track to at least like leading the conversation for a third MVP, especially with Embiid missing so many games.
I agree, man. And the first two MVPs, which is a fun sentence to say, you saw him really, really pushing to carry a team that needed it. And he's even better now. And I think maybe the way it manifests most is he's in the MVP conversation yet again, looking like an odds-on favorite now the more games Embiid misses. And does it look to you like he's really, I don't want to say broken a sweat, because of course he has in the good matchups, the tough matchups. But has he kicked it into sixth gear? Does he look like he's straining? I would say no.
No.
So, for Jokic, like so many of the great players, that first corner they turn where the game slows down for them, that doesn't necessarily stop, right? The great cerebral players, LeBron James, really a perfect example, they spend their whole careers learning. And so even as some of their physical gifts start to change, like they're just getting better and better and better. Like what haven't they seen? And I think Jokic is kind of in that level now on both ends of the floor where you're probably not going to catch him surprise. You could maybe do it once, but across a 7-game series, good luck.
It's been awesome to watch, and he continues to play really well. Jamal Murray seems to be rounding into form a little bit more as the season goes along. He's been playing a lot better, especially in that most recent Milwaukee game. But tell the world about Peyton Watson, because I think he's one of those guys. Everybody knows the starters. Everybody even knows Christian Brown, and Reggie Jackson's been around the block. But it's very possible that Peyton Watson is the 6th most important player on the team. And I can't believe I'm saying that.
Yeah, 6th most important, 6th most consistent, maybe higher, 6th best. I think a lot about Michael Malone's challenge to him, and I'll answer your question in a bigger context, bigger picture, but his challenge to him earlier in the season to never let effort be the problem. Make sure you're coming in and doing something off the bench. And man, we're at like 20 plus games running now where that's been the case. Peyton Watson is the most interesting story, I think, in Denver. The big picture stuff is, their starting 5 is the same. Not a lot has changed. But the real thing I think we all find ourselves pleasantly surprised by, particularly interested in, is Peyton Watson's potential. And a lot of it is his physical gifts, man. He is a wing with, he's not built like Giannis, but it's that wiry, sometimes when he goes to the rim, you just think defensively or offensively, when he jumps and meets someone at the rim or dunks, you think how many guys move like that or can do that?
Sure.
And it might, sometimes depending on the question, the answer, you could narrow it down to 12 guys, 10 guys, especially defensively. In that Bucks game last night, we watched him, I think, do an admirable job guarding Giannis. You're going to get got. And then also at times switching to guard Dame. And that's not a ton of guys have that versatility. And I think anytime someone showcases it, we get excited league-wide about what they could be. And Watson's that guy. Crazy, man. A high school prospect, five-star high school prospect that averaged 3+ points per game in college. And he has broken out in a major way for the defending champions. And there will be this balance now for the rest of the season of the playoff version, playoff rotation, Peyton Watson, come in, play your ass off on defense, grab rebounds, be disruptive. He can do that, but he's also flashed more. And so there are some big picture, how good can he be offensively? I think there are real question marks there, but the sky's the limit when you can move the way he can. And this is a guy who's just turning heads in Denver.
A lot of fun to watch. Obviously going to be a defense first guy, but like you said, he's been flashing a lot of interesting things on the offensive end. He's never going to be a great shooter. I don't think he's ever going to be a great passer either, but he can do some stuff. And when you have a guy who can do some stuff, that's what gets you into lineups. That's what gets you into starting groups. And you just can't be shut down entirely if you could do multiple things. So that's a really good point for Peyton. Let me ask you this. So this team, it feels like they are pretty complete. I don't necessarily think that there's too much that they can add. If you had your druthers, you'd probably want another big, want somebody who's a little bit better there. Maybe even somebody who's a little bit more of a consistent shooter off the bench. But, does this team need anybody in the trade market and the buyout market? Do you expect them to try to add anybody?
I'd be shocked. I think there's a combination of what we talked about earlier. Maybe shocked is strong, but I'm not expecting it.
Sure.
The combination of again, these rotations shorten, and the Nuggets feel very, very, very good about their 1 through 5, maybe 1 through 6 now with Peyton.
Yeah.
So it's not the same thing as can you get 10 championship worthy guys, you know? And so I think that between that and then also the kind of assets they have are going to make it difficult to make a meaningful upgrade. You know, first of all, you can't really trade Zignagi anyway now, but also, is there a ton of value there?
Yeah, probably not.
You know, you'd have to part with one of the young guys, but obviously they are part of Calvin Booth's grander plan to keep Denver running here. It's not just about winning one title and then two was cool. So I don't think they're keen to move off of Christian, Peyton, Julian, even the guys we haven't seen like Jalen Pickett, who he gave a contract to right away. So they would have to do that. Do you move off? Let's say we call Julian Strawther a luxury.
Sure.
You could move him for a backup center. Is that worth it for a problem that might just fix itself in a couple months anyway? We did this last year. The backup big was a problem until it wasn't. And sometimes I wonder if you're just kind of chasing your own tail, if you get too caught up trying to fix how you look when your best player is not on the floor, because when they're a player like Jokic, the idea is for them to be on the floor. That's the whole thing. So yeah, I don't know if you want to overcorrect and kind of start giving up too much of the youth movement to try to patch up holes that I don't know if they're going to sink your ship.
It is funny that I did just mention, they could probably use another shooter off the bench. And the guy in Denver, forgot that Julian Strawther exists because he's been playing in the rotation for a little bit here. But he's like you said, this is a patchwork ship, and there's some stuff that I've been thinking about with the luxury tax and the tax apron, the second kind of level that they're going to reach next year that is going to make it more difficult. So you want to continue to develop internally and keep your guys. And if you trade those guys away, then all you're left with is minimum contracts. So it's I think that Julian Strawther's way more valuable than a minimum contract right now, because who knows what he could be at this level. He could even be a minimum contract. So we'll see what happens. But
and those guys off the bench, struggling, sure, much like last year, but this version, they have a chance to get better because they're younger guys with ceilings and headroom, right? I don't think anyone was expecting Jeff Green to suddenly find the best basketball of his career, but guys, it's reasonable to expect guys like Julian, Christian, Peyton to keep getting better and better. So having some sort of investment that you feel good in, rather than just spending the next 3-4 years plugging the holes as they spring, the leaks as they spring. I get why they're trying to maybe have more control over it than that.
Oh yeah, it's we are not always privy to the plan because they'll keep things close to the vest, but there is clearly a plan in this, and it's clearly a very long-term one, and Calvin Booth is trying to execute it, and I think he's executing it pretty well. Final thing here for you. Are there any teams in the Western Conference that have emerged that are at the top, or teams that you are keeping an eye on as, hey, this could be a really, really tough series for Denver, or is there one team that stands out above the others?
Yeah, I think for most of the season, the most popular answers here in Denver were two teams, Minnesota and Oklahoma City. The latter being a team I think we all feel is of that caliber, but probably maybe too inexperienced in the playoffs, which I know Thunder fans are tired of hearing about. How many times do we have to win good games? I remember when the Nuggets were the 2 seed, and I was indignant. But you do got to lose together, I think, before you can win together. So they've probably got to go through that. The Wolves are undoubtedly the best suited team to defend Denver, but their half-court offense is an Achilles heel, and as well suited as they are to guard Murray and Jokic, you're still asking young Anthony Edwards to match what those two guys are doing in the clutch, and that's a big ask with how clunky things are there. The team that's emerged for me, Ryan, are the Los Angeles Clippers, and I hate that. I hate saying that. I would love to just pretend that there's that final nail is in the coffin, but this James Harden trade was meaningful. There are plenty of real questions, including how will Harden perform in the playoffs? How will these guys' bodies hold up? And, the latter is particularly important with a Kawhi-led team. but having an actual lead guard that can set the table and take some pressure off of Kawhi and Paul George, they have more bigs than they've had in years past. Not saying those are good answers to Jokic, but they are answers when at times that Clippers team hasn't had any.
Sure.
And so I just think they have more lineup versatility, and with Harden, they have more balance, and they have a point guard finally. So, I'd still take Denver against anyone right now in 7, but I'm starting to wonder if this is the most I've feared. This iteration of the Clippers is maybe the most serious I've taken them. And I'm looking forward to laughing at this in a few months, hopefully.
Well, it is funny that and it was Chris Paul and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant last year, where how is Denver going to guard them in the pick and roll? How are they going to solve this issue? Maybe it's the same this year. Maybe it's different this year with a team like the Clippers that I think is probably a little bit better suited to make those tough shots and continue generating good shots against a team like Denver. And also, we've just seen Nikola Jokic kind of struggle against the Clippers this year. That's happened. And the one of the wins that Denver had was, I think we can all agree, was a pretty fluke game from Reggie Jackson and DeAndre Jordan. But it was still very interesting to see. And I think there are going to be some interesting things that happen that kind of shift this. And maybe there's a team that emerges after the trade deadline where you're like, okay, now you got to take them a little bit more seriously.
Who would you pick?
I think you're
Same
right
question
about the
to you.
Clippers.
Yeah, I think so. I feel dirty saying that, but they do look good. They look good.
They got to prove it first. I think that's fair. That's just the Clippers organization. I saw somebody compare them to the Detroit Lions, and I think that's a very salient point. So,
right, until it happens. But I do think that this is I think some of those prior iterations were built on medical tape and a dream, and I think that this one is a little more okay, this team is pretty good.
They're pretty good. They're playing games too. That's a big deal.
Yep.
Well, hey, we'll see what happens. I'm very curious to see how this goes going forward. Any parting thoughts on Denver before we get out of here?
Just, I was wondering, you get to do this now. You're covering all these teams in the league, and it's so funny how much easier it is to take bigger picture perspectives with other teams.
Yeah.
And I was thinking how if, the Bucks, for example, had been without Dame for 16 games this year, but they were in a close second, I'd probably be looking at them as a sleeping giant. And there's been a little bit of hand-wringing in Denver, but in truth, to Jamal to have missed as many games as he has, I don't think Denver's gone anywhere as the team to beat. They can be beaten, but I just think they're in a good spot. So that's where I'm at.
Very clear, and I'm excited for it. Obviously, a little bit partial here in Denver, but we're just a little bit. But that's okay. He is Brendan Vogt of DNVR Sports. Make sure to go check out his podcast with Adam Morris as well. Really appreciate you taking the time, Brendan. Let's talk soon, all right?
Dude, love to.